Kui Anin, hello, and my name is Olivier Leblanc of Harvest Moon Designs, and I'm so thankful to be here with you today in partnership with Consent Comes First and Ryerson Aboriginal Student Services. Today I'll be giving you a tutorial on how to make your very own brick stitch fringe earrings. I love this style of earring because it's not only really easy to make, but it's also accessible. You don't need to be spending a lot of money in order to get your supplies and get started. And today I'll be going over supplies that I use, exact brands, and we'll also be going over where you can find them. I'll be teaching you some basic color theory and also pattern making. So you'll be having all the tools you need to make your very own earrings. I'm so excited to be here. Let's get started. First, we'll be going over materials. So the first thing you need is a bead mat. If you don't have a bead mat, that's okay. You can use a scrap piece of leather, you can use just a piece of felt. Some people really like using painter's palettes. Personally, I like a bead mat. I've found that's what works best for me, but again, there's no hard and fast rule. This is just what I recommend. And then I'm gonna leave a link in the description to where you can find all these things I'm going to mention. This bead mat in particular I got from Bead Effects. It's a bead store in Toronto. So the next thing you're gonna need is some needles. So these needles, they're nothing special. I believe these are size 12. I prefer size 12 for doing fringe because I find that anything bigger you risk snapping beads, especially if you're using size 11 beads, which is what we're using today. So needles, and then next is thread. So I use Fireline for the brick stitch part, which is the top part of the earring. You don't have to. This is just what I prefer because it keeps it nice and stiff. And then for the fringe part, I use Nymo size B. Again, you could use my Yuki thread, you could use 00 Nymo, but any nylon thread is what you want, and you want something that has low stretch. And then, yeah, these two, this I actually got on Amazon, and this I got from Bead Effects as well. And next is some wire guards. So this is part of the findings. This is what is going to go on the earring in order to put your earring, like your finding. So I'm using rose gold lever backs. I like lever backs because they have a built-in back to them, so that means that they're not going to fall off. I like hooks, like I'll use hooks sometimes, but I've been on a lever back kick lately. And then you'll also need a pair of embroidery scissors. I like small scissors because it's easy to snip, but you could use any scissors, doesn't matter, this is just my preference. I got these off of Amazon if anybody's interested. And then you'll need a pair of pliers. So the pliers are for putting the findings on. If you don't have pliers, like jewelry pliers, you could probably use the smallest tool pliers you have, like workshop pliers. Otherwise, usually the metal is soft enough you can bend it with your fingertips until you can get a pair of pliers. And then you'll need a lighter. I like to use a lighter to burn off the little ends of thread at the end just to finish it off. And then for the beads, we're using size 11 beads today, size 11 check beads. So these are size 11 in, I believe these are the color's called Pearl. And then we have teal silver lined, one of my favorites. And we also have copper lined, but I mean it looks like rose gold, which is why I'm using it, because we're gonna make a pair of rose gold earrings. And then I'm also a huge fan of bugles, and here we have rose gold AB bugles that we're gonna be using. So I just want to go over the anatomy of a brick stitch earring, just so you know what I'm talking about and you know kind of the vocabulary. So this triangle piece up here, this is called brick stitch. So because it looks like little bricks, like the way it's kind of staggered. And then the dangly pieces are called the fringe. Up here, the little loop is called the wire guard, and this is the finding, which is what goes in your ear. So in terms of building a pair of brick stitch earrings, you always, well, the way I always do it is I always make the brick stitch first and then attach the wire guard, and then I go down and do my fringe. So another important thing to talk about would be the different types of beads. So there's two types of beads that you can use for these kinds of earrings, and that's seed beads or delicas. So the difference that you can see in these is that the delicas look very cylindrical. They look almost square, whereas the seed beads are a lot more rounded. So it really depends on personal preference. This pair was made with delicas. A lot of people like delicas because they snap together, like you can see at the top here. But there's really no right or wrong, like they're both great. Delicas are much more expensive though. Czech seed beads and Miyuki seed beads are a little bit less expensive, and personally I think they're a lot easier to learn with, and once you kind of get the hang of, you know, fringe earrings, then you can venture into making earrings with different types of beads. Okay, let's talk about colors and color palettes. So I actually have a really easy trick for, you know, getting inspiration for color pairings, because I know that's something a lot of people struggle with, but honestly just go on Google or Pinterest and search up like rose gold color palette or spring color palette, Halloween color palette, and tons of inspiration is going to show up. You know, and some people might think that's a cheat, but personally I think it's really helpful, and I mean, a color is a color, nobody owns that. So here are a couple of my favorite color pairings that I want to go over and kind of talk a little bit about why they work. So I'll start with this one. So pink and green, if you look on the color wheel, they're actually opposites from each other. That's a big reason why they work. Well, technically it's red and green that are opposite, but this is a twist on it. That's the thing. When people sometimes look at the color wheel, they think, oh, red and green, well, you know, that's Christmas. But if you alter the shades, you know, you can make some really nice matches. And this is, to me, is like screams spring, you know, and it's just a really beautiful pairing, really fresh. This is one of my all-time favorites, is this kind of, you know, this hunter green and the mustard. These are not opposites on the color wheel. They're actually side by side, yeah, the yellow and the green. But, you know, this works because the colors just complement each other really well. The cool versus the warm, and they're the same tone, they're the same earthy tone, and they just complement each other really, really nicely. And then one of my all-time favorites actually would be periwinkle and rose gold. There's just something about this combination that is so, you know, I don't want to say classic, but really timeless, really pretty. I don't think I've ever made jewelry with this color combination that I hated. The softness of the blue with the rose gold is stunning, and it's to me, it's so much prettier than using regular gold with the periwinkle. So we've got another pairing here. These are actually opposites on the color wheel, purple and yellow. You know, and you know, if you think purple and yellow, you think of Easter, or, you know, just, it's not really enticing. But again, I chose like a buttercream, I think it's called buttercup yellow. And then this really beautiful matte, I believe it's called fuchsia line, purple line blue matte, yeah. And these go really nicely together. I think a big thing too with beads is playing around with texture. I love doing that. If you look at some of my work, you notice that I love playing around with texture. It's very rare that I make jewelry that has beads all in one texture. So that's a really nice pairing. And again, this is the same thing as this pairing over here, where you're mixing shades and tones, instead of doing like a stark bright yellow and a bright purple, you know, which is, you know, can be not so appealing to the eye, depending, you know, who you talk to. And then here's another one. These are opposites on the color wheel, orange and like a blue turquoise. This is a really nice summer color palette. You know, notice how some color palettes just automatically make you think of a certain season. And again, this another thing of variation on tones. Like if we did a bright orange and a bright blue, like sure, it might work in some ways, but this, in my opinion, is a lot more pleasing to the eye. I mean, depending what you're doing. So this is graph paper that you can use to map out your pattern. It is free and you can download it and print it, and I'll leave a link down in the description. So the great thing about this is that it's sized for size 11 seed beads, and that means that you get the sizes on the side, see the measurements, that will tell you how large your earring is going to be, depending on, you know, how long you make the fringe or how wide you make the brick stitch. So today I'll be making a pair of brick stitch fringe earrings that are 15 beads wide. So I'm just going to go ahead and count 15 beads across, and notice how I'm counting along the squares that are already lined up. that are not staggered, because our very first row of beads is actually going to be 2 beads stacked on top of each other, and you'll see why soon enough. So once you've counted your beads on each side, you can go ahead and form a triangle to the top, and then you can draw in where the little wire guard's going to go, and then you have your triangle to make your design, and then you know where you can make your design. So I'm just going to go ahead and use these graphic markers, and I'm going to color in my design. Mine's going to be pretty simple, but I just wanted to show you how to use the graph paper. It is pretty self-explanatory. So here I'm just counting out my pattern. I'm going to be doing 3 cream, 20 teal, and then 3 rose gold, with the cream and the rose gold going up by increments of 3 with every fringe column we do, but the teal is going to remain the same. And then I'm also doing 6 blending beads in between, so like 1 teal, 1 cream, 1 teal, 1 cream, 1 teal, just in order to blend the colors from one to another so it doesn't look as dramatic. So I'm just drawing that in right now. So unfortunately this graph paper isn't actually long enough for how long I want to make my fringe. What you can do at home is you can just print 2 pieces of graph paper and then cut it and tape it so that you can elongate your graph paper. Or you can always use just like regular mathematical, cube graph paper, whatever you like, depending on, how long you want to make them. So now let's start laying out our beads. I'm just going to lay out the beads for the brick stitch first, just to keep it simple. I have this really handy little beading spoon that I love to scoop out beads, like loose beads from. It's really great for cleaning up beads as well, instead of just using your fingers. Okay, so for the brick stitch, I use Fireline. You can use 9mm Miyuki. I just like the Fireline because it's stiffer. So for this size of brick stitch, I will probably use about, I'd say about 4 feet of Fireline. But the thing is, if you're making your very first one, I wouldn't recommend, doing something quite so big. I would do, maybe instead of, I'm doing 15 across, instead of doing 15 across, maybe do, 9, something like that, something small. I should also mention that, if you keep the numbers odd, you can have the middle one the longest. So I'm just gonna thread, my needle. Alright, and let's get started. So, like I mentioned, our very first row of brick stitch is going to be 2 beads stacked on top of each other, and that's for 2 reasons. It's for stability, and then after, when we're doing the fringe, it also stabilizes the fringe themselves, so it's kind of double duty. So how I like to start my brick stitch is I pick up 4 beads, and then your thread tail is here. Okay, and you have your beads here, and then you go up through the last 2 beads, just the last 2, like that, and then pull. And then what you should have is 4 beads in that formation. And then I like to secure this, so I just go around a couple times. There we go. So I've gone around a couple times, and it's pretty sturdy. It'll get stronger as you go along. So now we have our 2 beads like that. Now it's time to build onto this. So for this stitch, for the base row, you're going to be picking up 2 beads at a time. And essentially what you're going to be doing is you're going to be picking up your beads, and then you're going to bring your needle in on the side that doesn't have any thread coming out. So in our case, it's the top here. So you're going to take your needle and you're going to go down. And then you're going to go back up the 2 beads that you just put on there. and you're just gonna keep going. So we're gonna do 15. Alright, so now that our base is finished, I did 15 across. Now we can start building up. So, like I mentioned, this is the only row that's gonna have 2 beads. I'm only gonna do 1 bead from now on up. You can still choose to do 2 beads. Some people can even do 3, and basically what that does is it's gonna elongate your shape and make your triangle a lot longer. We're gonna have a shorter, fatter triangle, but I think it's easier to just learn with 1 bead. So I'm now gonna show you how to go up, like how to start a new row. So when you start a new row, you're gonna pick up 2 beads, and then if you can see here, there's thread bridges. So every single piece of thread going from bead to bead is called a thread bridge. So you're gonna bring the needle not under the first one, but under the second thread bridge, because you have 2 beads. So each thread bridge counts for 1 bead. So I'm gonna bring it there. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna go back through the 2 beads, pull, and then your last step is to go up the second bead in, just like that. And the reason I like this method is because then you don't see any thread, it's all hidden. So after that, you just go 1 bead at a time. So I'm picking up 1 bead, I'm going under the next thread bridge, pulling, and then going up that bead. And that is the stitch you're going to use for most of this. So let's just keep going. Alright, and then I want to go over how to start a new row just one more time. So again, 2 beads, and then not the first thread bridge, but the second thread bridge. Go under, pull, and then back through both your beads, and up through the second bead in. And that's it. And then keep going. Now it's time to put the wire guard on. So I stop at 2 I don't go any more than that because we need those two to put the wire guard on. So I'm gonna grab just one. Okay. Oop. So you can see it has holes in it. So what you're gonna do is you're just gonna thread it into the needle like this. And then you're just gonna go down the other side of the wire guard and go down 2 beads for stability, and then pull. And you wanna make sure that the thread goes right in there, And then you're just gonna go back up diagonally through these beads back into the wire guard. And I go twice. So I did it once, and I'm gonna do it second time, and I find that's enough to make it secure. You're more than welcome to go around a couple times if you want to make it even sturdier. And then now I have a bunch of thread left and I have to tie this off. So my method, I don't use any knots, I just use tension by weaving the beads or the thread between the beads. So I'm gonna bring my needle down a couple of beads like that. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna weave my thread in and out around here. So I'm gonna go this, like this. So notice how I'm just weaving in and out, and then I'm gonna go around 2 different beads. And that going around the beads like this creates tension, and then you don't need any knots. So I've gone around about twice now, and that should be enough. And you can test the tension by pulling on your wire guard. Mine's not going anywhere, so I know the tension is good. And then all you gotta do is snip. And then there's a little tail, but we can burn that after. So now we have our brick stitch complete, and we can move on to making the fringe. So I'm just putting out my other colors. So we got this beautiful silver lined teal. This is one of my very favorite colors. I don't know, I just love the way it sparkles in the light. So we got that one. And then let's get our copper lined beads. Okay, and then last but not least, we're gonna just put some bugles out. So, yeah, I mean, I only need 15 anyway. And then next, for the fringe, I use Nymo thread. So I'm switching threads again. If you were using Nymo for the top, that's fine. You just continue with the with your Nymo, your Miyuki. So for this, I mean, it's really hard to tell. Even I haven't gotten good at being able to judge the length of thread, but I will show you what to do if you run out of thread. So for now, I'm probably just gonna measure out, probably again, about 4 feet of thread. You want to be careful though, because if you're new to this, having a lot of thread, especially this like nylon thread, it tangles really easily and it can be really hard to manage. So be careful. It's better to start with like less thread than too much. So I'm gonna thread my needle. Good trick for this is you bring the thread really close in between your thumb and your index, and you can force the needle right through, and it threads really nice and easy. All right. So again, I don't use any knots, so I'm going to show you how I start my thread. So one important thing is wherever you're going to do your tension weaving to anchor the thread in should be on the side that's going to be on the back. So you should do all your weaving on one side so that when you flip it around, you can't really see it. I mean, I'm using cream, so it will blend in, but you still, you know, I find it's better. It just looks nicer. So what I'm gonna do is I want my thread to come down these 2 beads. So what I'll do is I'll probably start up here, going up, and just be gentle. You don't want to pop any of the beads, so don't force it. Okay, and you want to leave a decent tail because you don't want to pull it out and ruin all your hard work. Go down, and then up. And then down again. So we're gonna go around one more time. Oh. And if your thread does get tangled, just be patient and just gently try and undo it. And then we're gonna go down all the way to start our fringe. There we go. All right, so following our pattern of 3 white and then 6 blending, and then 20 of the teal, and then another 6 of blending, and then 3 rose gold, and then 1 bugle. So there's a few different ways to end a fringe. I like to do 3 beads on the end. Some people like to do 1. You can also do 5 in the same method that I do 3. Just gives it a different look, so I encourage you to play around and kind of see what you like best, and I'll show you what I do. So I pick up 1, 2, 3, and then I leave these out as I string back up. And then as I'm coming back up, I'm going up the 2 initial beads here from that very first foundation row that we made. So, and that's why we did 2, because the 2 beads is a better foundation for the fringe than just the 1. All right, so we have our first fringe done, and then you want to watch the tension as well. So you want to make sure that it's snug enough that there isn't a ton of space between the brick stitch and the fringe. So I'll show you what you don't want. You don't want a gap like that. You want it to be pretty snug, like that. You don't want it to be too tight so it's super stiff, but see how it still hangs nicely? So that's what you want. So next, you just go down the next 2, down the next column. You always want to use these 2 beads up and down. Alright, so now you can see I don't have that much thread left. I don't want to risk doing another row and running out and it being really, really tight. So we're going to switch thread, but before, there's a couple things that you need to do to make sure that, you know, the fringe that you've already done stay nice. So again, you want to check the tension. That's really important. So that actually looks pretty good. There's no gaps, but I see the potential for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and you're just going to tug on each fringe going towards the one you just did, and what this does is it just tightens up all the fringe, and you can kind of just play around with it, but honestly that does look quite good. So now the way that we're gonna tie this off, I don't use knots, is same way that we did for the wire guard and same way that we did to start it. Really, starting and ending thread, I do it the exact same way, just tension. So you're just gonna weave it up into the brick stitch. Doesn't really matter where you go, just go up just a couple rows. So that's fine, we went up 2 rows. And then you can start weaving it around a pair of beads. So I'm gonna go around twice. Okay. So to make it extra secure, what you can do is then go around a neighboring bead twice. There we go. And then check your tension. That looks great. Okay. Perfect. And again, don't cut it super short, just give it some room to breathe, but maybe about 1 inch. And then get some new thread. So we're halfway and we used about 4 feet. So I'd say again about the same, you know, the same amount for me. Again, you know, do this depending on you know, your project. And again, don't be afraid to use not enough thread. You can always add more, that's not a problem. So, and again, it's gonna take some practice, so the more you do it, the easier it'll get for you. And then I always like to stretch the thread because it is, see how it's kind of kinky? So I like to stretch it, make it nice and smooth. And then just like the same way that we started our thread last time, you're gonna wanna go, let's see, where can we start? Let's start it here. And then again, leave yourself a bit of a tail in case you pull a little too hard. Go down the next bead. Go up again. So we're going around these 2 beads a few times. And then I'm gonna go up the bead 1 more to the left and then back down and around just to give it that extra security. And then you're gonna go down your 2 beads here to continue your fringe. And that's it. So we've done our last fringe, and I'm just coming back up and again going up through those 2 beads like usual. And then a few things to do before you tie off is the first thing is you want to check your tension. So you want to look for gaps between the brick stitch and the fringes. So, and if there is any, then what you can do is what I'm doing here is you can just tug at them in the direction of the very last fringe. And then after that, you want to go up the side of the brick stitch. You want to go pretty far up. I'm going about halfway in order to tie it off, because you want there to be quite a fair amount of tension. If it's too low, it might not, the tension is not as good. And then here again, I'm just doing the exact same thing that we did. I'm just going around a set of 2 or 3 beads, and then I'm gonna do a couple extra loops here just to really make sure that it's nice and secure. And then now I'm just gonna snip that thread off, and I'm gonna take my lighter and I'm just gonna burn the little pieces of thread that are left over. As you can see here, there's just little bits, and I like burning it in just because it gets rid of fraying and it also solidifies it. Just be really careful not to hold your lighter on there for too long, because you can start melting the thread that's actually in the fringe. So just a quick pass is all that you really need. And then now I'm going to be adding my finding. This is the last step. And again, like I said, if you don't have any pliers, you can use your fingers. Most findings are soft enough for that, but again, the plier is the best way.
Thank you so much for joining me, and I really hope you enjoyed that. I hope this is bringing you a little bit of happiness in these dark times, and I would love to see all of your creations. Please tag me in your Instagram photos. I can't wait to see what you make.